So what's the next round going to be like then? I haven't really poked the models in the eyes yet. Okay, I refuse to accept the argument that Sanders had a better chance in Ohio than he did in Illinois due to racial breakdowns, and I suggested that Michigan would be a split, which was very different, but I've otherwise largely arrived at the same conclusions via different metrics. And you might expect that, really, as I'm arguing that race is a proxy variable rather than a predictive one. As such, you'd expect it should work out more often than not, even if it's logically incoherent to suggest that a racial breakdown is a causal factor. Meaning that, what I'm saying is that the models might get it right most of the time, but it's basically by accident. Alaska and Hawaii are giving me an opportunity to push back a little, although I need to provide the caveat that I have not seen any polling and reserve the right to modify my analysis as a consequence of direct data appearing. So the models will tell you that there aren't any black people in Hawaii or Alaska, so Bernie should win big. It's a lack of people predisposed to voting for Clinton due to the color of their skin. I do take a different view. So rather, let's look at votes so far for places outside of the contiguous 48. In American Samoa, Clinton had 68%, and in the Northern Marianas, Clinton had 54%. You might want to note, though, that Sanders isn't making up the difference, right? So Clinton got 68 and Sanders got 26 in American Samoa, and Clinton got 54 and Sanders got 34 in the Northern Marianas. So you're still looking at like 10% that's voting otherwise in these distant, far-flung places, and they weren't a really long time ago either, right? So you're looking at write-in ballots, local politics, all those sorts of things, right? And it is a small sample, and direct polling will render it obsolete if any appears, but I do think it's a better measure in at least Hawaii, maybe less so in Alaska. We should also not forget that Sanders did very well in the Democrats abroad, taking in 69, but you also note that the 69-31 split it adds right up to 100, right? Which is just more evidence that it's not the same thing as a state or territorial primary. Sanders has consistently outperformed Clinton with people that are, one, very liberal, and two, that are very educated. If you're going to vote in the Democratic primary from Singapore or something, chances are that you're both. Okay, so you can understand that in terms of ideology and education. That's why Sanders won the abroad vote. Okay, so nor are we dealing with indigenous inhabitants, so it's not really useful in looking at the Hawaii or the Alaska. The takeaway, though, from what I'm saying is that it's not that I should automatically favor Clinton, it's that I can't automatically favor Sanders in either of these states. Although note that they are caucuses, and what I say about caucuses. I need direct polling. I don't think anything that you're going to pull out of the contiguous 48 is useful in Alaska or Hawaii. All right? But I do think Clinton's tendency to do better in distant territories, and Hawaii is a distant territory, gives her an advantage in Hawaii, even if it's not a particularly large one, just because there's not any data. Okay, the logic may be less applicable to Alaska, but I think it's at least as useful as racial profiling. So what I'm saying is that Clinton should probably be favored in Hawaii based on the idea that she does better in distant territories, and that there's really no useful information about Alaska at all. What about Washington? Well, I need to learn from past experiences, right? It sure looks like she cheated in Arizona, and it sure looks like she cheated in Ohio, and you ended up with inflated wins that didn't really match the numbers. It looks like she cheated in Massachusetts and Illinois and managed to win in situations where she probably actually lost. And it looks like she cheated in Michigan and lost anyways. So why wouldn't I expect her to cheat in Washington? It's an open primary. It's the same as Michigan and Illinois. So he ought to blow her away there. You're looking at an extremely liberal state. The states around it have voted overwhelmingly for Sanders, and it's an open primary, so you can bring independents in. So not only is it a state where you can bring independents in, it's a state where one would expect that Democrats would at least split, right? So 70% should be a low bar. But based on what we've seen her do, what that just means is that she'll stuff 10 times as many ballots and make it that much harder for people to vote. Okay? You may be expecting me to call Washington for Sanders by a big margin. I'm not going to. My actual prediction for Washington is that if there's any remaining doubt about whether this process is rigged or not, it will be over by the time Washington is tabulated. Washington will just make it that much more obvious. I'm not going to put numbers down. If Clinton manages to win Washington, it'll just be like blatant, right? But I think that even if it's like close, right? Like if Sanders only wins by 55, that will be enough to basically, knock him out, right? If he only gets 55% in Washington, he can go home, kind of thing. He's not going to because he wants everybody to vote, and I agree with him, but it's over, right? So I'm not going to put those numbers down. Whether it's that Clinton barely wins or Sanders is kept to 55 when he should really probably expect something more like 75. It's hard to say exactly how they'll do it. It will depend on turnout, right? So even if she rigs it like massively, if there's huge turnout, he could still manage to barely win. But it doesn't matter. He has to win by a huge amount, and he probably will if you discard the cheating, but he won't actually, because they'll make sure he doesn't. That's about all I'll say about that. We'll wait to see if some polls come out. What I will say is this. I think there's a reason you didn't see any polls in Arizona. And the reason that you didn't see any polls in Arizona may also prevent any polls from Washington from appearing. If you want to see any, about the only person that's going to publish any polls for Washington is the Sanders campaign. But yeah, maybe I should do that. I'm going to put an open request for polling in Washington. If you have the ability to poll people in Washington, please do so.